I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today we're driving the Jeep Wrangler. Now, do I look like someone that four-wheel drives a lot? No, but I confess that I've always thought that the Wrangler looked pretty cool, and I do actually like getting out on, soft trails every now and then, and I think that's exactly what this car is kind of all about. I think there's two sets of people that buy the Wrangler. There's the people who know way more about this stuff than me. They intend to buy the car and then modify it hugely, tires, lift kits, etc., and go the whole hog. And then there's the second, probably bigger set of people who buy Wranglers who, they like the classic styling of this thing. They go camping every now and then, go off-road a little bit, but also intend to drive this thing on-road a fair amount of the time. So what is the new JL Wrangler like to live with in that capacity? What's it like out here off the beaten track, but also in town? Is this actually a thing that you can live with every day? Because look, the reputation of the Jeep Wrangler has always been that this is a seriously rough and ready vehicle, but pretty crashy, pretty uncomfortable in town. Jeep worked a lot on the on-road dynamics for the new version of the car, the JL, so we're going to be testing whether or not that hard work has actually resulted in something really usable. Now, as always, you can get the Wrangler in 2- and 4-door configurations. We've got the little 2-door here. I think it's cute, but still tough stuff. But it's very, very short, quite squat, quite wide, but really, really pumped up. All of the standard sort of Wrangler lines have been retained on the JL, just a little bit softened in the headlights and sort of here and there. The 4-door is much, much longer. That's the only version you can get with a diesel here in Australia, at least. Everything else is a V6 petrol only, naturally aspirated in fact, and we'll be seeing how that works on the road in a moment. But first, the interior, because this is one area where Jeep have invested a huge amount of money. Basically, although the interior still looks kind of Spartan and utilitarian, it doesn't feel that way. It actually has quite a nice interior. You find soft touch materials, which is a real surprise on a car like this. Stitched dashboard, soft door tops. The leather seats on this Overland model are pretty nice. Creamy leather steering wheel. It's all rather impressive, actually. And for a rough and ready vehicle, it's probably nicer than it actually needs to be, and that's fine. But I mean, this one, as you see it here, this is 64 grand on the road in Australia. That's Australian dollars, not US dollars. If you're watching from over the Pacific, welcome. So it's not a cheap car. It's twice the price of a Suzuki Jimny. So I guess you kind of look for the evidence of that in certain places. Infotainment wise, we've got an 8.4 inch Uconnect touchscreen. FCA's Uconnect system is really easy to use actually, because it always keeps all the target controls easily in sight on the screen. You've got this sort of row of shortcuts down the bottom. It's very crisp and high resolution. You've got Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It's really good. Dials, really classic analog dials here behind the steering wheel. You do have a big color screen though as well, which is kind of cool. Orange instrumentation, I like that. Steering wheel's got quite a few buttons on the front and behind it as well. There's a bit of a learning curve. I keep skipping tracks rather than turning up the volume on these controls behind here, but if you own the thing, you'd learn in 5 minutes, wouldn't you? Now, one thing about it is that although the seats are trimmed in nice leather, they're actually very uncomfortable. They're flat, they don't have a lot of lateral support, and it's just not a car you want to do long distances in. There's a lot of wind noise that we'll see from the upright screen as well. So I don't think anyone thinks the Wrangler is a long distance car. So that's okay. For nipping around town, for off-roading, you don't really care about stuff like flat seats. So no big deal. Like stuff like the grab handle here, that's pretty cool. And lots of little Easter eggs to find as well. Little Willys Jeep there on the windscreen, repeated down here on the shifter for the auto gearbox. And practicality, it's okay. We've got a big central box here, 2-layered actually, that's cool. Cup holders, little tray down here that's kind of inclined down so stuff doesn't fall out. The door pockets though, they're really just nets, so anything that's not kind of safely held down in them is going to fall out. And the glove box, that's tiny. One thing I will point out though is that there's a bit of an ergonomic issue. There's no footrest, and I don't know if that's a conversion to right-hand drive thing that's gone wrong, but combined with the seats, which aren't so comfortable, it's really not a road trip car, this thing. What is cool though is that the 2-door does have back seats, and what I'll do is I'll come around and I'll show you how we get to those. Obviously, if you're going to transporting people in the back a lot, then you'd buy the 4-door, but the 2-door does have back seats. They're easy to get to. All we have to do is open up this front door. That opens wide enough. Front seat comes forward, further forward than you'd expect, and then it's a semi-graceful hop up into the back, semi being the key word. Chuck yourself back in, and it's okay. You know, back seat's a proper one. The backrest is not like upright or anything like that. You've got headroom, you've got a good view out the windows here, and then if we bring the seat back, it's going to be a bit hard for you to see, but you know, you have to take my word for it. I've just got a little bit of leg room. My legs aren't jammed up against that back seat, but it's not a place you'd want adults to be all the time, but kids would be all right back here. That's if you want to put your kids into a car with a fairly woeful crash rating. We'll come back to that in a minute. Oh, got to get the seat out of the way before you can close the door. A trap for young players. No worries. Coming around the back, one detail I actually quite like about the new JL is the tail lights, which have shifted to LED. Like the lights up front, they look pretty cool. Otherwise, it's all very classic. We've got the shell with the spare wheel sitting here on the back door. You've got exposed tow hooks. This hasn't become a soft-roading SUV. It's still a proper 4x4. Open up the door, which opens out, meaning in a tight car park, there'll be a bit of an issue, but you do have the glass that opens up. That's cool. You'll see the boot in the two-door with the rear seats up is very small. It's enough for just a couple of smaller bags, soft bags, some hard bags here. But what you can easily do is drop the rear bench. Now that does kind of kick your stuff almost out of the way here, but once that's folded down and up, you can see the amount of space at least doubles, probably a bit more than that. So, you know, in terms of practicality, it's not too bad. Not really a car you'll be putting heaps of stuff into. And it's pretty easy to bring the glass down, swing this back door closed. By the way, the lights keep going off because this thing actually has proximity entry. It's actually got quite a few nice little toys nowadays, especially in this relatively high spec Overland trim. But the important thing is Jeep have told us how much they've done to improve this thing's dynamics on road, but also here off-road. So let's go and check that out. So what is the Jeep Wrangler like to drive? Have they gone and made the JL too on-road focused at the expense of off-road capability? Well, the answer to that is a pretty certain no. We have had it out here on the sort of fire trails and relatively light off-roading that you can find in the New South Wales Southern Highlands, and it just absolutely eats it up. Jeep make pretty clear that they design their vehicles for the Moab Trail over in the US, so really nothing that we can throw at it on this sort of stuff is going to come anywhere close to probably even half of its limits. And you can find plenty of footage of crazy Jeep Wranglers doing crazy things out there, so there's no avoiding that. And in fact, the JL series Wrangler is still very much biased towards off-roading ability. This thing is not a comfortable car on the road. It is usable, it's dailyable, it's no big deal, but you definitely need to adjust your expectations of the comfort levels of a vehicle. It's not an SUV, I'm not going to call it an SUV, before you'd kind of be happy driving a JL Wrangler every day. Now, out here on this stuff, it all makes sense. You got solid axles front and rear, and you know that's very suitable for a car like this. It enables you to extract the best kind of capability out of it. It makes it much easier to modify out of the box, and that's important to Jeep Wrangler folks. You've got really big beefy wheels, a small wheel, 17-inch wheel, big beefy tires, but what you would do is you'd change those out straight away. As it comes from the factory, it's wearing Bridgestone dual or highway terrain tires. Now there's a huge amount of sidewall that insulates you well, and in fact the ride quality both off-road and on-road is very good. You don't feel bumps, potholes, ruts too badly, and off-road it's amazing at soaking up huge bumps and holes in trails that you might not have seen, and you hit, you know, what would be too fast in some off-roaders is totally fine in the Wrangler. So it's quite confidence inspiring in that regard. The short wheelbase is also the one to have if you are going to dedicate this thing to off-roading, because the breakover angle is really good. There's very little space between the axles, and as such you can traverse obstacles that, you know, are very difficult unless you're driving something like this or a Jimny or something very lifted. The four-door body style is a lot longer between the axles, so that's going to be something where, you know, you can choose the two-door if that sort of stuff is important to you. I also think the two-door is just quite endearing generally. I mean, this is the Jeep Wrangler body style, isn't it? The original. I think it looks cool. I think it looks like a pumped up little monster truck, and that appeals to me. But for some people, the four-door will make more sense. Now, what's under the bonnet of this thing? So what we have is the tried and tested 3.6 litre Pentastar V6 petrol, naturally aspirated, no turbos here. Makes decent power, 209 kilowatts of power, 347 Newton meters of torque, and that torque is made at about 4100 revs peak torque, so it's not too high for an Atmo engine, but you do have to work it to get the best out of it. Thankfully, it channels that torque through a ZF 8-speed automatic now, so definitely a good automatic transmission, and it suits an Atmo engine just as well as it does a turbo unit, so that's cool. On the 5-door, or on the 4-door as some call it, you can get a small-ish 4-cylinder diesel. Over in the US, you can get a 3-litre V6 diesel, which would be awesome, but here it's a 2.2 litre, and that, that's a good option to have. Haven't driven it personally, but if you want the best fuel economy, that's the way to go. The petrol can tow 1500 kilos, so no real problem there unless you're towing something massive, but it's not great on fuel. In town, it uses 15 litres per 100 Ks pretty reliably. On the highway, because it's so slab fronted, it uses like 10, 11. So it's not an efficient car, but it can take 91 octane petrol, so at least it doesn't require premium, which is nice. Now, it's also a really entertaining thing off-road handling wise, especially if you leave it in too high. You can definitely get up to some shenanigans, but it's quick and easy to switch the thing into 4 high. Can be done on the go, and 4 low if you pull up, and it's nice and capable when you do that. And in fact, it's so neutral when 4-wheel drive is engaged that it's really difficult to upset it, which means it's quite a nice, easy, secure off-roader. Other stuff, the steering is just so remote. On center feel is vacant. An improvement over the old version, I'm sure, but compared to almost any other vehicle you can buy today, it's very disconnected. The short wheelbase is definitely less stable than the 4-door. Just going around urban corners, it can give you a sensation of tipping over. It's not. Not only is it kind of pretty secure and on a decent platform and decent chassis, but the electronics are looking out for you. It's just a funny feeling to get used to a short wheelbase off-roader like this. Now, the elephant in the room is the safety rating for this thing. So it's got a 1-star crash test rating from ANCAP, which is not great. And the reason for that is both a mixture of a lack of some adaptive systems, but also frontal impact protection for the occupants. Only scored about 50% there. So there's no excuse in 2019 for a 1-star crash test rating, and that really does give Jeep some work to do on this car. It's not unheard of for a facelift of a car to improve the crash test rating, so hopefully it's being looked at carefully. You do get adaptive cruise control, you get AEB on this model, it's not standard on the base model. No lane keep assist, but you do have stuff like blind spot monitoring. Interestingly, there's also a very crisp reversing camera, so it makes it slightly easier to park. But I think all in all, you don't go into a Jeep Wrangler expecting it to be like a Mazda CX-5. Ultimately, this is a specialized vehicle, and you buy it for a specialized purpose, and that is off-roading. If you want to buy one and dedicate it to purely on-road use, you've got to be willing to accept the compromises. So those are my thoughts on the Jeep Wrangler JL. Any Wrangler fans out there that might have been worried that the JL was going to go soft and become like a Cherokee needn't, because this thing is still a serious 4x4. That means it's good here off-road. It still means that there are some pretty big compromises on-road. However, despite the improvements that have been made to the dynamics of this thing, it's not that comfy. It doesn't handle very well, but that's okay, because when you bring it out here, that stuff all starts to make sense. Where it is impressive is actually in the improvements to the interior, and just, I think there's some general value in the capability, even though this one's over 60 grand on the road in 2-door Overland spec with this nice blue paint. For a lot of people, that's going to make sense. It can be built out to a serious rig for, under 100 grand. You'd be silly though if you didn't also test drive the Suzuki Jimny, which is much smaller than this, but it's also much cheaper. And naturally, if what you actually want is, you know, an off-roader that looks cool but drives as comfortably as a car, then you'll need to look elsewhere. If you've got a lot of money, maybe it's something like a Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. Now, if you haven't subscribed to Chasing Cars, please do so below this video. Hit the notification bell so you never miss one of our full-length Australian video car reviews. Leave me a comment, tell me what you think about the Wrangler, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.